Good evening. I'm Ed Murrow. The name of the program is Person to Person. And again tonight we'll be doing a little informal visiting. We'll be going to visit that talented young actress and singer, Eartha Kitt, and then across town for a visit with that hotel man, business executive, and New York State Boxing Commissioner Bob Quisenberry. We'll be ready to go in exactly 20 seconds.
Long distance, Maine to Florida.
The American Oil Company, the drillers who produce oil, the scientists who refine it, the seamen who transport it, the men who deliver it, and the Amoco dealers who serve you. All the Amoco people calling you person to person.
If you own a radio or a television set, listen to record players or jukeboxes, you've probably heard the voice of Eartha Kitt. Until about 2 years ago, she was comparatively unknown, although she had danced with the Katherine Dunham Group here and abroad for a number of years. But then Eartha Kitt came to Broadway. She was the star of New Faces, and today the 26-year-old girl from a town called North in South Carolina is getting ready for a Broadway play. She sold more than 2 million records and is one of the 10 favorites of the jukebox fans. Eartha Kitt now lives in the 3-room penthouse of this building on Riverside Drive. Her apartment is near Grant's Tomb, overlooks the Hudson River and New Jersey's Palisades. She's lived here now for 3 years, but because of her work in this country and abroad, she hasn't spent more than about 6 months at home. Eartha Kitt did 6 hours of rehearsing today, but now it's over with, at least for today. Good evening, Miss Kitt.
Oh.
How are you? How are you?
Thank you. Oh, I'm fine.
What were you listening to?
Oh, I was listening to some of the songs that I was rehearsing this afternoon from Mrs. Patterson. Of course, with the rain and everything, you know, things aren't functioning properly tonight. And I think that I didn't give the machine a chance to get heated.
Well, I hope we didn't interrupt you. Let's see if we can heat it up again. Do you have anything more on that tape machine?
Well, yes.
Let's give it another try.
As a matter of fact, let's reverse it and see what happens.
We're getting a great burst
there.
of silence.
It's kind of strange after all that devil talk.
Oh, that doesn't sound like the Eartha Kitt I've heard.
Mrs.
Oh, there.
Mrs. Patterson, Mrs. Patterson. She looks like a rainbow when she's dressed up fit to kill. And even though you say no, I'm sure I always will love Mrs. Patterson.
Tell me, do you usually rehearse your songs at home?
Well, not usually. I just put them on the tape to see what it sounds like, because in this particular play I'm supposed to be 15 years old.
Uh-huh.
And you see, the voice has to be a little higher than my voice is ordinarily.
Well, I've been reading some conflicting comments about your voice. One critic says that she can make a song burst into flame, and another says she's virtually voiceless, and the third says she can sing with the ferocity of a camp meeting shouter. How would you describe your voice?
Well, I've never really stopped to try and psychoanalyze my voice. I think I've been mostly interested in what other people think of my voice. And I think that it's one of those things where if I tried to psychoanalyze it myself, I would probably be revealing too much. And I like to leave things to the imagination of the other person, if you know what I mean.
I do. Now, in this new play, Mrs. Patterson, do you just sing an occasional number, or do you have a big part?
Well, I sing about 4 or 5 songs. They were written by Jimmy Shelton. And as a matter of fact, I'm on stage all the time. I only go off for about 2 seconds and I come right back on again. So it's quite a large part.
Mm-hmm. Does this play have any relationship to your own life?
Well, as a matter of fact, it does, because I was born, as you said, in North, and my life was more or less like the part of Teddy. And I remember when I was a child, I longed, too, to get out of a small town and go to the big town like New York and try to live a better life and, live more comfortably than I was living in North.
Well, a moment ago, I saw your panda friend. Is that for decoration, a gift, or just a gag?
Oh, well, it's all three, Ed. It was a gift, as a gag, and I use it for decoration.
Do you have any other animals around the house?
Oh, yes, I have other little things. They're little presents that were given to me by fans. And you know how fans are. They're constantly giving you little things, and for some strange reason or the other, people think that I should have cats.
Uh-huh.
And this is one of them. And this is another. This is a little puppy, for instance. And this is a little clown that someone gave me as I walked out of the stage door one evening.
You've got a real cat around somewhere, too, haven't you?
Oh, yes, but she's never seen so many people in her life today, so she's in hiding.
Tell me, in your last 2 years, your big years in show business, did you ever have a night when everything seemed to go wrong?
Oh, yes, as a matter of fact, I did. I think the most drastic thing that has happened to me in my career in the nightclub was when I was at La Vie en Rose. As a matter of fact, I have a shoe here that was mainly responsible for the accident that I had at La Vie en Rose. It's this shoe that was made in Paris with the steel heel, etc. And I remember I was dancing during one of my numbers, and they had waxed the floor, and I didn't know it. And I made a turn, and I fell flat on my face.
Well, that sounds like a considerable disaster. What about your biggest success?
Well, I think that the biggest success I had was probably at the Macambo in Hollywood. Closing night there was my first engagement outside of New York, and Charlie Morrison presented me with a number of wonderful presents. And I was on stage, I remember, and it was after 3 of the songs, that is a group of songs at the show. And, well, after the 3 songs, the waiters came up on stage with bouquets of roses. Each one of them had an armful of roses, and they presented them to me. And with all the wonderful things that Charlie Morrison had done for me, I was sort of emotionally wrapped up anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And when I saw these roses, well, I went into tears, and I tried to start my singing again, and I broke up again, and first thing I knew, the pianist was crying, the public was crying, the orchestra was crying, Charlie Morrison was crying, and we all had a wonderful tear party.
Well, have you pretty much planned your career, or have you found that luck and fate has been a determining factor?
Well, no, I haven't really planned my career. As a matter of fact, I don't believe in planning anything too thoroughly, because one is often very disappointed when he's gambling on something so closely. As a matter of fact, one of the examples of luck, and it's a matter of luck, I suppose, among other things, like being in the right place at the right time. I remember when I first came back from Europe, I was around New York trying to get myself together, wondering what am I going to do next, how am I going to get a job, and I was supposed to go into the Blue Angel to do a couple of songs to see if the public liked me or not, and if they liked me, then I would get a job, and if they didn't, then I would start all over again. I was supposed to do this on a Saturday night. On a Friday, I got an urge or something said to me, why don't you go back to Paris? Well, I had just enough money to get a ticket for a boat and enough money to get me across on the boat. And I arrived in Paris the following week, just in time to find out that Orson Welles had been looking for me because he had seen me in a nightclub there previously, and he had been looking for me to play opposite him in his production of Faust. What could be more lucky than being in the right place at the right time?
Mm. Well, I know you must get a lot of mail from youngsters asking for advice about their careers and so forth. What do you tell them?
Well, it's very difficult to advise people. I don't think that it is possible to advise people, because I believe that if you want something badly enough, your animalistic instincts will teach you and show you what your next move should be. And, of course, I answer every letter that I get, and my only advice is, if you want something badly enough, you'll figure out how to get it.
What's the hardest work you ever did?
Well, I think the hardest work I did was when I was about 15, or maybe a little earlier than that, maybe 14, I had a job working in a factory in Brooklyn. And it had to do with machines that made emblems for soldiers' uniforms.
Mm-hmm.
And another machine of the same kind had made little Swiss embroideries. You know, the little Swiss holes that you have in materials?
Yes?
And my job was to see that all of these bobbins were filled properly, that they never gave out of thread, and also to see that, well, it was very complicated. I can't even explain it to you, because there were thousands and thousands of little teeny-weeny bobbins, and this machine must have been at least a mile long. At least it seemed that way to me. And I had a little flashlight that I went up and down this machine, looking to see if the bobbins were finished or needed rethreading.
That must have been a soul-destroying job, but that's a long way from that picture I've been seeing just the bottom of there on the wall, isn't it?
Oh, yes. Well, that picture was done by Lady Bird Cleveland. She brought it to me about 2 or 3 weeks ago, and she did it all from a couple of photographs that she had of me. She had never met me before, and I think she did a pretty good job because she has a lot of characteristics in it of me, and I don't think it's bad at all, do you?
I like it very much indeed. Eartha, I've heard you talk about your desires for a Cadillac car, a mink coat, a little yacht, and lots of loot and so forth. What do you actually collect?
Well, I like paintings. As a matter of fact, I have one in here that's very interesting. Would you like to see it?
Yes.
This one was painted by someone in Canada, and it was done through a friend of mine who was in Canada at the time. And I recorded a song of his a couple of months ago. Oh, maybe it was a year ago. I don't remember exactly. A song called African Lullaby.
I don't believe I've heard it. How does it go, Eartha?
Oh, well, let's see. All over Africa, each baby's ma and pa sings him a love song, da-da-da-dee-da. Well, you know, and then it goes into Swahilian and all that sort of thing.
Tell me, how many languages have you picked up in your travel?
Well, I've picked up, je parle en français, je parle italien, je parle espagnol, toutes les choses comme ça. Aussi turc, etc., 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 and others, of course.
Tell me, do you ever get fed up with your busy schedule? All the rehearsals and recordings and pictures and so forth?
Well, if I said that I didn't get fed up once in a while, I don't think I would be telling the truth. As a matter of fact, yes.
What are your plans for the future?
Well, I have no plans, really. I'm going to do this play that opens in Detroit around the 18th. We'll be in Detroit for 3 weeks, and in Chicago for 7 weeks. And we're scheduled to be here at the National Theater beginning December 1st.
Well, much good luck. Thank you very much for letting us come to visit you, Eartha Kitt.
Thank you very much.
It's been very pleasant. In just a moment, we will be going over for a visit with Bob Christenberry.
Hi, friends. I'm Bob Dixon. It probably isn't news to you that preventive medicine is the thing these days. People don't wait until it's too late to go see a doctor. Now, preventing trouble in your car depends entirely upon your treatment. And, of course, the lifeblood of a car is the gasoline you use. And speaking of gasoline, what that gas does to your car is just as important as what it does for your car. So to safeguard the health of your car, use Amoco gas, a perfect preventive medicine. You see, Amoco gas is the one gas that has no additive. It needs none. It's all pure petroleum. It can all burn. It leaves no harmful metallic deposit that can foul up your engine, wear it out before it's time, and cause annoying repair bills. And remember this, too. No other motor fuel offered to the motorist is refined to as high an anti-knock value as Amoco gas. So use some preventive thinking when you pick your premium gasoline. Play it safe. Drive into an Amoco station and get a tank full of Amoco gas. And then get behind the wheel and find out firsthand why we say Amoco gas is the one gas that delivers full power without penalty. And now here's Ed Murrow.
Robert K. Quisenberry was born 55 years ago in Huntington, Tennessee. He left there at the age of 16 to fight World War I with the Marines in France. He was seriously wounded. After the war, the young man from Tennessee joined the United States Consular Service, later became a newspaper reporter, and then he went into the hotel business. On the door leading to his large paneled office in New York's famous old Astor Hotel, a sign reads, Executive Office. The door isn't big enough to list all of his titles and all of his functions. He's president of the Astor, has an active interest in a number of banking, real estate, and dairy businesses, and more recently was President Eisenhower's personal representative to Paraguay. He's a leader in about a dozen civic organizations. But Bob Quisenberry is best known as the unofficial mayor of Times Square and as chairman of the New York State Athletic Commission, usually called the Boxing Commission. Since the Quisenberrys were married in 1929, they have lived in Washington, Cleveland, Florida, Peoria, and Pittsburgh. They have been New Yorkers since 1935 and now live in 7 rooms in this Park Avenue apartment in Midtown Manhattan. Since Mr. Quisenberry keeps pretty much on the go, you're apt to find him almost any place at any time. But by some strange coincidence, he happens to be home tonight. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Commissioner. What title shall I use?
Hello, Ed.
How are you?
Nice to see you.
Tell me, Bob, how does a hotel man get mixed up in the boxing business?
Well, you know, it's my belief, Ed, that a hotel man has a responsibility to his community, to his state, and when I was offered the opportunity to serve as chairman of the New York State Athletic Commission, I accepted the responsibility because I believed I could do a good job. I believed that there was a job that needed to be done, and so I accepted the appointment.
I'll bet I know what you watch most on television.
Now listen, you don't think that it's boxing, because I'll tell you, my friend, I attend at least 2 fights every week.
Well, that's nice work if you can get it.
Well, now, you think so? I'll tell you what you do. Go with me Wednesday, and Wednesday morning we'll go up to the commission offices, and there we will supervise the physical examination of Ezard Charles and Rocky Marciano, who are fighting that night for the heavyweight championship of the world. Then we'll go from the offices of the physician down to the offices where we will check the plans that have been submitted. Then we'll go from there over to Madison Square Garden, where the official weigh-in will take place. Then from there, we will come back to the office, where we'll meet the commissioners from Illinois, from Michigan, from Iowa, from Massachusetts, and from Pennsylvania, and other sections of the country who are here for the fight and who want to discuss various problems in connection with boxing. And then later on, we'll sit around there and listen to complaints from various and sundry people who are licensees of the commission. And then at 6:30 in the afternoon, we will go up to Yankee Stadium, and there we will confer with the police officials to make certain that proper police protection is allocated to the stadium. And then we will check the seating to make certain that it conforms to the plans submitted by the garden. And then we'll go and check the ring to make certain that it has been properly laid in conformance with the rules of the New York State Athletic Commission. And then it's about time to go into the dressing room and sit down and talk with the officials who've been assigned to work there that night. Well, then we go and take our seat. The fights begin.
Now, I'm tired by now.
But wait
Bob,
a minute.
How do you account for the bad press that boxing seems to get?
The bad press?
Yeah.
Well, it deserves some of it. On the other hand, it's the whipping boy of sports. After all said and done, very few people have a nice thing to say about boxing because, you know, the boys who are engaged in the sport, they come from the other side of the tracks. It's the underprivileged sport.
Uh-huh.
It's the sport of the boy who comes from Avenue A, not the man who comes from Park Avenue.
What's the toughest decision you've had to make as commissioner?
Well, the toughest decision I've ever had to make was a boy who thought he had championship possibilities. He thought that, well, he was a great fighter. He wasn't a great fighter. He wasn't a good fighter. And furthermore, he wasn't physically fit. And when I had to tell him that we had to refuse him his license, that was the toughest decision I've ever had to make.
Bob, where is Mrs. Quisenberry tonight?
Well, you know, we have a home at Shawnee on the Delaware in Pennsylvania. And at Fred Waring's Shawnee Inn and Country Club, this is golf week.
Oh,
And my wife is out there in Shawnee on the Delaware. You know, we love it out there, and we love the golf and all of the things that we have out there in the Poconos. And my son's married, he has his home of his own, and he has all of the things that a young man who is trying to make his way has to do. But I have my daughter Sally here with me, and she's acting as my hostess. And after this party tonight, Sally is going with me out to Shawnee, and we'll participate in the festivities, the golf weekend.
Good evening, Sally.
Good evening, Mr.
Are you
Morrow.
getting ready to go back to college?
No, I'm being considered for a part in the new Broadway show. It's called With Drum and Colors, and it's going to be directed by Eddie Dowling, and the star is James Barton.
There's a certain excitement and thrill about show business for you, isn't there?
Yes, there is. I've always loved the theater. I started out working backstage, as most apprentices do, and I like that part of the theater almost as much as I like acting.
How does your dad feel about this business of having a budding actress in the family?
Well, I don't think he entirely approves. I think he'd rather have me in college.
So he compromised and agreed that you should do what you want to do, is that it?
Yes.
Bob, you've come in contact with a lot of youngsters. Do you find them more cynical today than they used to be?
I do not. As a matter of fact, I'll tell you, I'm pretty much sold on the youth of America. I think that their thirst for knowledge is something that is quite inspiring. I've been quite active in youth work ever since Fiorello LaGuardia, the late Fiorello LaGuardia, was mayor of this city. He appointed me as chairman of the youth committee for the west side of New York, and my investigations and my experience has convinced me that there's not so much juvenile delinquency as there is parental delinquency.
Uh-huh. What's the best advice you have for kids, Bob?
I beg your pardon, I didn't
I
get
say,
it.
what's the best advice you have for kids?
The best advice I have for kids?
Yes.
I'll tell you. I get my advice from a bestseller. It has been and still is a bestseller. It's known as the Holy Bible. And from the book of Psalms, in the 19th chapter and the 14th verse, I use this verse every day. May the words of my mouth, the meditations of my heart, be acceptable in thy sight, O Lord, my strength and my Redeemer. But I add to that, Ed, that I hope that I will conduct myself in such a way that every man with whom I come in contact that day will be better because of the contact I have had with him.
Bob, I've often heard you say that you don't regard New York as a big city. Just exactly how do you mean that?
New York's not a big city. New York is a lot of small towns thrown together. After all said and done, when you stop and consider the people who come to Times Square in front of the Astor Hotel, on the village green that we call it, and celebrate New Year's Eve, the passing of the old year, the coming of the new year, who come down there to celebrate the cessation of hostilities in Germany in World War II and later in Japan. I've never seen any rowdyism. I've seen people carefree and happy, enjoying themselves. And frankly, you know, the average New Yorker is just like the average person in Pawtucket, Indiana, or Des Moines, or Sioux Falls.
Well, then, do you hold the opinion that New Yorkers are hicks?
No. The smart alecks are, yes. But you have smart alecks in every community. Don't you think?
Yes, I'm sure that's right. But as a famous innkeeper, what's the most unusual thing that's happened to you in all your years in the hotel business?
Well, we almost had a riot in the Astor one time because Olson and Johnson were insisting on getting a room for Mr. Bear. Well, it so happened that I was born and reared in Tennessee, and the Bear Ice Company in Jackson, Tennessee, was one of the large public service companies down there. And I went down to the desk to see what the trouble was. And they had a live bear down there they were trying to get a room for.
I guess you met a lot of interesting people in your time at the Astor and elsewhere, haven't you?
I certainly have. And I want to tell you one thing. I've had the pleasure of knowing such people as General Mark Clark and our great president, General Dwight Eisenhower, and in addition to General Eisenhower, he's the present head of one of the big companies of our country, Jim Van Fleet, who's trying to make things good for the people in Korea. But the two outstanding people that I've been privileged to know, Herbert Hoover, former President of the United States, and Bernard Baruch.
Yes.
Bernard Baruch is probably one of the finest men, Ed, that I've ever been privileged to know. I talked with him this afternoon and invited him to go to the fights with me on Wednesday night. You know, I shouldn't postpone this fight, should I?
No.
But Mr. Baruch was with me at the fight about 3 months ago, and he enjoyed it tremendously. And I'm hopeful that he'll be with me again on Wednesday night.
Bob, that trophy there, are you giving it to someone, or has someone given it to you?
Giving it to someone. I won that trophy. That's a golf trophy, I'll have you understand. And I'm not certain, though, whether I won it for traveling the longest distance to get to the tournament or being the best-dressed man competing in the tournament.
Tell me, what do you think television has done to boxing in general?
I think it's done a great deal to clean up boxing. As a matter of fact, boxing is no longer put on in a room where 300 to 3,000 or maybe 20,000 people might see it. But today it's in a fishbowl. It's in the homes of millions of people around this country. And a fighter must give his best, and fighters must be well matched if they're going to continue to receive the appreciation of the public. And after all said and done, the best evidence that the public does appreciate boxing is the fact that today that hardly anyone wants a program against it. Don't you think I'm right?
Well, I hope you're not completely right. We had a 10-second buzzer here to sound us off, but it won't work, and the recording machine wouldn't work earlier. Thank you very much, Bob Christenbury, for letting us come and visit you.
Thank you.
We'll be back in a moment.
It says here that the word friction comes from the Latin and means to rub. Friction wears things out. Now, here are two metal parts of an automobile engine. If they rub together, your car can't operate properly. But you can avoid harmful friction with this, Permalube motor oil, the oil that cleans as it lubricates. With its double action, your car runs better and lasts longer. So get Permalube motor oil at the Amoco sign of greater values from Maine to Florida. And now here's Ed Murrow.
We have been visiting tonight with Eartha Kitt, the talented singer and actress, and also with Bob Christenbury, the New York State Boxing Commissioner and well-known hotel man. There are some of the people who contributed to this program. And now, from person to person, good night and good luck.
Let me show you how to look lovelier in just 10 days, or you get your money back. It's a home beauty treatment developed by a doctor, and it's easy. All you need is medicated Noxema and a wet face cloth. Morning and night, wash your face really clean with Noxema and warm water. Before you make up, smooth on Noxema as a powder base. And before bed, smooth on greaseless Noxema. In just 10 days, your skin will look lovelier than you ever dreamed possible.